This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Tariq Maqbool,
an inmate at the New Jersey State Prison. This call will be monitored and recorded.
Hello?
Here he is.
Hey, Jack. How are you, bud?
Not too bad, my friend. How are you?
I am good, man. I got a massive headache, but other than that, everything else is good.
Well, mate, that's how I felt after reading statements by Andy, Jay, and Z over the weekend. Oh, my Lord.
Oh, yeah? You read them all?
Oh, my God. Hello, and welcome back to 1 Minute Remaining. My name is Jack Lawrence, the host and creator of this show. Today is part 6 of the story of Tariq Maqbool, a man sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for a double homicide that happened in 2002. The deaths of Joong and Mun Ahn were violent, ruthless, and Tariq says he had nothing to do with it. Today, we'll explore 3 statements made to police against Tariq. So as I've said, today we're going to look at 3 statements, 3 witness statements that were made to police. You've got Andy and Jay. These are the 2 guys that Tariq says came to him with this apparent deal worth potentially $1 million. As we know, Tariq says he really didn't have any interest in being part of the deal, but he saw no harm in introducing them around to some of his contacts. We will also hear from Zaid. Now, Tariq met Zaid at the mosque, and due to all of these guys having similar backgrounds, Tariq introduces them all. Zaid, Andy and Jay would all subsequently start hanging out, and due to Zaid also working in a phone store, he would become involved in this deal as well. So those are the 3 statements: Andy, Jay and Zaid. Within these statements from these 3 guys, we're also going to hear references made to 2 black guys, Paul and Steve Reed. These are the guys who worked in the phone store with Zaid. So that's how they're connected to all of this. We will also, I know it's a cast of characters, hear the names Joong and Mun Ahn, also known as John and Mike. So Joong and Mun, John and Mike, same people. These are the 2 gentlemen who were looking to buy the cards and who would subsequently become the victims in this crime. There is a lot of names, but don't panic. We're going to take this slow and I will make sure we do not get lost along the way. I also want to preface this episode by saying I know my job is to stay unbiased and impartial. And in as many cases as I possibly can, I will. Especially if I don't think I have enough facts to warrant anything other than impartiality. But I'm going to just say that after what I spent all weekend reading, it is incredibly hard for me to do this. I will try. But after you hear what I now know, you may too be of the same opinion. But we will reserve judgment until you've heard it all. I have never been so flabbergasted by utter tripe.
Statements? Yeah.
Well, I kept saying to my wife, I kept looking at bits and going, I don't know, I just couldn't believe the shit I was reading. It was just ridiculous.
Figured it out?
It's just so dumb. It makes no sense. The whole story is so stupid. You've got 3 legitimate businessmen. It's not like they've apparently now got the cards. Tariq said, no, I've got the cards, but I don't want to give it to them. I want to rob them. I asked him if he has the cards. He goes, yeah, but I don't want to give it to these guys. I have arrangements already. So there could have been cards, but as far as you know, they also want to rob them. Right. Okay. Okay, great. Let's continue on with this story. And now you're just going along with this apparent robbing of these people. Any reason why you've decided to do that? No? There's no talk of any threats. He doesn't say, I was threatened to do this. He's just gone, yeah, sure, let's do it.
They built the whole case around it. But I know I've been very, very positive about it, but I know how the situations are. Later on, this is, when I got arrested, that was my first time getting arrested. I didn't know much about things. Over the years, I have learned a lot. Jersey has been a pit of, a lot of shenanigans, let's just say, when it comes to criminal justice. In 2007, they passed a law. I mean, I don't know if it's a law, but, it's directed by the Supreme Court in Jersey, that everything has to be recorded. Or even if a person says that I want to talk to you, but I don't want to go on record, that denial or just acquiescence has to be recorded itself. But when I got arrested, the standard operating procedure for them was to basically talk to the people for hours and then record at the end.
This is the thing I don't understand. They supposedly they have a pre-interview that's essentially off the record, and then they put you on the record. It's like, so what the hell is going on in that pre-interview before you start recording?
They're basically coaching people. I learned this, and I didn't really believe it till I saw things myself.
This is something that I find totally bizarre, this whole pre-interview that seemingly is off the record. Again, I'm no police officer, no attorney, I know nothing at all. But I would have thought that any time you are speaking with anyone, including main witnesses to a crime, anytime you are in a room talking with them about the alleged crime, you'd want everything documented. Everything they're telling you should be on the record and noted down, especially if we're talking about something as serious as a double homicide. But seemingly, this didn't happen. You even see references to these pre-interviews in the statements. At times, detectives will say things like, "Now, in our earlier conversations, you mentioned X," or "You were telling us earlier about XYZ." Callbacks to previous conversations. Not only this, there are even a number of occasions where the person being interviewed has obviously missed something, and the detectives will steer them back to it, or ask leading questions, and even just fill in the blanks for the person. I'll point these out to you as we go along.
I came here and I asked a lot of guys from, in prison you hear everybody who has had statements, and everyone told me the same thing, that they were talking for like 4 hours, 5 hours. And the recording part was basically at the end. It is such a weird thing that, as a matter of fact, they messed up a lot in my case because there were residual reports, which I have never seen, but I saw one report where Zaid, he showed me that report. He said, while he was being interrogated, he said they brought in the girl Maribel, and they basically let them go speak to each other alone. And I'm not casting anything on Maribel. I'm just saying this in general, that this is the type of stuff they do.
Okay, so it is, what's the time? It is 10:36 p.m. I have spent the better part of today going through these statements that were made. These are pre-trial statements, to the police. So Jay, Andy and Zaid's statements. So what I obviously wanted to do is read the statements, all three of them, and take notes about the discrepancies. And so far, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So far I've got 15 pages of notes on discrepancies between their statements. So obviously I cannot read all of those. I cannot go through every single minute detail of that. So we've got to work out how we're going to do this. So this is the big thing I'm confused about is I don't know what Zaid's whole thing is here, because he seems to be protecting Andy and Jay by saying they were victims, but throwing himself in the shit. That's what I don't get. I don't understand why he's kind of implicating himself, although he's not really involved. He kind of got dragged into it.
All I can think of is, what he had told me in the county was he was not supposed to come in. He was supposed to walk, and he said, "Tariq, I just, I'm sorry, I'm listening," a whole bunch of stuff. And he said they were just making me. I was tired. I was crying, and remember, he was 20 years old, so I don't know what they were doing and stuff. But I really have no sympathy for him at this stage of my life. But because I've asked him a lot of times, and I said, can you just come clean at least that part? But he just wouldn't, and he said, I can't take a chance. I got a deal, and they will take my deal away, stuff like that. And so I don't know what his motivation was. That maybe he was promised that he's going to walk away, because they lie. They probably told him, you say this, and that, and you can go home. You can sleep in your bed, that type of stuff. I really don't know, but all I know is at the end of the day, it was a small room. If they saw the same thing, but why are they saying all different things?
I have reams and reams of notes from these statements about the discrepancies related to this case and how it supposedly played out. So what I'm going to do is focus on what I believe to be the biggest issues in these statements and focus on the actual crime that Tariq was on trial for, the murder of two men, Joong and Mun Ahn. We'll look at how each witness says that the crime plays out and check out the major discrepancies from each statement. So just before we get to the actual crime, there are just a couple of things I think are important to clarify about this whole deal that was being put together from the statements. One of Andy and Jay's biggest claims was that Tariq was adamant that this deal must be in cash. This narrative would be important for the prosecution's claims that Tariq was planning all along to rob these people. The fact that he wouldn't do the deal unless it was cash showed that he was planning to have these guys show up with their money and rob them. Tariq told me from day one it was never him who said anything about cash, and it was in fact one of his contacts who he had approached to try and help these guys get the cards they needed, Kenny Chong.
And this is when Kenny said it, and this was his words, and that never came out in the trial. He said, I will try to do my best, but if it's that big of a deal, it has to be in cash only.
Kenny is never brought to testify, and in fact is never even mentioned in any of the statements or at trial. However, I have a report from a PI hired by Tariq's family who did go and speak to Kenny Chong. He says in his discussion with the PI that he recalls being approached about the purchase of cards and said that he insisted that a deal of this size be done in cash. Now, also, throughout all of these statements, this deal seems totally legitimate. There are no suggestions to begin with that anyone had any concerns that this was anything other than a legitimate deal. Andy seems, by everyone's recollection, to be the one brokering the deal, and he eventually brings Tariq in to try and get the deal done. In fact, in Jay's statement at one point, he talks about them going to Tariq to try and convince him to get in on the deal, which doesn't really fit the narrative of him wanting to rob someone. But anyway, the only time that it is ever suggested that this deal was in fact going to be a robbery is in Zaid's statement. And this is one of those examples of leading that I mentioned previously. So they're going on talking about the events leading up to the deal that would happen on Thursday night, the 31st. They're talking about cash, it's going to be $300,000. And then he's asked, that's Wednesday night? Yes. Okay, anything else happen Wednesday night after you? No, that's it. Nothing? What about Thursday? Thursday comes in the afternoon. Joong calls Andy. Hold on, what about Thursday morning? Anything happening? Anything happening you know that you're aware about this transaction? Oh yeah, I go to visit Tariq in his store. He goes to me, how about if we just take the money from these guys and don't give them no cards? Let's rob them. So now, all of a sudden, this apparent legitimate deal has become a robbery. And what happened next? He just asked me, am I willing to do this with them? Who's them? Paul Reed and his brother Steve Reed. How did Paul and Steve get involved in this? I guess when they spoke to Tariq, I don't know which one insists on robbing these people or taking their money from them. Okay, so Tariq told Steve and Paul about this transaction, and they agreed, or did they make some kind of plan to rob these people? Yes, they made some kind of plan. When was this plan made? Do you know? No. Thursday afternoon when I got there, I was just told this is what we're thinking about doing. So I told them, if we're getting good percentage on the cards, why do we need to do it? Why can't we be happy with less money? So Tariq, Paul and Steve already have plans to rob these guys. Right. Okay, how is this thing going to happen, this robbery going to happen? They just told me to go because Andy was coming to see Tariq after that. The officer would probe a little further by asking Zaid if there was any cards at this point. So there were no cards at this point? No, because at the moment when he told me in the morning, I asked him if he had the cards. He goes, yeah, but I don't want to give it to these guys. I have other arrangements already. But he never showed them to me. Okay, so there could have been cards, but as far as you know, they also want to rob them. Right. And that's that. Zaid, who claims to be friends with Andy and Jay, has now agreed to rob them, with no further questions asked. And it would appear the detectives are happy with this explanation and move on. So now it is time to take a look at these three statements from the perspective of this crime that took place. This murder that they say was done by Tariq Maqbool. Now, I just want to let you know that everything I read from these statements is verbatim as it is written from transcribes of recorded interviews with these three men. I am not making anything up. Nothing is embellished. It is all verbatim as it is written. The part of the detectives in these recordings will be played by a paid actor, and I will be playing the part of Andy, Jay, and Zaid.
The unfortunate thing for me is that I was praying that they all come to the trial because I read their statements, but it's just the sheer luck that no one came to trial. But Zaid had, made a bail, and he had jumped the bail and left the country. He got caught in Canada, I think. He was fighting extradition, and he had just vanished. The Reed brothers refused to testify, and prosecution wasn't going to use them because they tried to use the younger brother, but he refused to testify. And he told them, I'm not testifying against innocent men. And his brother, in his trial, basically told them, they wanted Tariq, so I just gave it to him. So they couldn't really use their testimony, but had they all come, I think I would have walked.
So, as you just heard Tariq state, out of Andy, Jay and Zaid, only one would actually make it on the stand against him at trial, and that was Jay. The only one, the prosecution would tell the jury, the only one brave enough to face Tariq Maqbool. As a reminder, coming up, you're going to hear Joong and Mun. Mun is the nephew of Joong. They are coming to buy cards. They have the cash and become the victims in this crime, also referred to as John and Mike. Joong, Mun, John, Mike, same people. I want to make sure we're all across it. All three obviously agree that this crime takes place on October 31st. They all agree that Andy, Jay, Joong and Mun are in a car together, and they're at a rest stop on the night of when they're going to meet up with Tariq to complete this deal. They aren't sure where the store is, where they're supposed to be meeting, so Zaid goes out to get them. Straight away, we have issues with time, but people can get times wrong. So they all meet at the rest stop. Zaid says that they all follow him back to the store. Now, Zaid says that they all go into the store except for Mun. He remains in the car with the $300,000 cash. But everyone else goes in. Jay also says the same. However, Andy states that Jay and Mun are in the car watching the money. So they all agree Tariq is not there when they arrive. He comes in later. Again, all different times, but we'll move past that. He then arrives. Now, Andy and Jay would state that Tariq was not happy with Mike being in the car. He wanted him inside. He didn't trust him. He could have a gun. Jay says that Joong then calls his nephew and says, "You need to come inside." So the nephew comes in and Jay goes out to watch the car with the money. The detective says to him,
"Was that okay with Tariq for you to walk out there by yourself?"
Jay says,
"Yeah, well, he was arguing though, but finally eventually he said okay, fine."
There is no mention of Tariq not being happy with Jay going outside in Andy's testimony. Why? Well, according to Andy, Jay's already out there. It's interesting to point out that Zaid says nothing about any of this. He says that Tariq asks where the money is, they say it's in the car, and that's that. So now we all agree at this point that Jay is now outside, and everyone else is inside. Andy says all of a sudden 2 black guys come in through the front of the store. Detective.
Okay, then what happens?
Then these 2 black guys enter from the door, the front, and then we hear everybody down on the floor.
Okay, when these 2 black guys enter, what do they have in their hands?
Oh, they have guns in their hands.
Okay, who else has a gun?
Tariq also pulled out at the same time that they entered.
What about Zaid?
Zaid also had a gun.
Okay, so you had 2 black guys, Zaid and Tariq, with a gun.
Yes. So let's look at how Zaid says this particular moment plays out. So Zaid says that then Paul Reed and Steve Reed arrive. The detective asks him how they got into the store. He says they go through the front and that he let them in. Now there's some back and forth about whether Zaid knew or didn't know that Paul was involved, but once we get through that confusion, the detective then says, did you open the door for them or did they have keys to get in? Zaid says they had keys. So they used the keys to let themselves in? Yes. So in the space of 4 questions, Zaid has gone from, did you let them in? Yes, to, did they use their keys to get in? Yes.
What happened then?
They walked in the office area and pulled out the guns.
What happened then?
They said everyone on the floor.
Okay, who's everyone? You on the floor?
Yeah, when I sit down, they were like, not you, go outside.
What happened then?
So everybody gets on the floor and they tied him up.
Tied who up?
They tied Andy, Jay, Joong, and the guy who came in with him. Now at this point, they obviously realise that Mooney has suddenly appeared in the store out of nowhere, and they've missed a vital bit of the statement, and have to suddenly backtrack and ask Zaid when this other guy came in. He proceeds to tell them that Tariq wanted him inside and Andy went outside to get him. Now remember, Andy says that Joong called this guy to get him in. So now we're back on track. We've got everyone in the store. They ask what happens next. And Zaid says he was told to go outside and move the money from Joong's truck. Now let's not forget, he says that he was told to go outside when the 2 black guys bring out guns and tell everyone to get on the floor. But he apparently doesn't go outside then, he instead stays where he's able to witness everyone being tied up. And then he's asked again to go outside, but this time go outside and move the money. Are we keeping up? Even I, as someone who's not a trained attorney, would have been able to point out the utter lunacy that was going on between these 3 different statements of apparently all these guys are in the same situation. You know, 1 minute Jay's outside, but Jay's saying, no, I'm inside. Just huge discrepancies. I mean, to the point where Andy was fighting back, apparently, and then he says that you guys locked him in a bathroom, whereas Jay says Andy fought back and he ran into the bathroom and tried to escape through the ceiling. How is Jay seeing him trying to escape through the ceiling if he was locked in the bathroom by you guys and they shut the door on him?
The worst thing is, I told you, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, when I was going for my PCR, the post-conviction relief. And when I got one of the reports, and that's where I saw their diary, they actually sat down, both of them, and wrote a story. To sit down and rehearse something, instead of going to police, it really casts a shadow on a person's, intentions and stuff.
So, of course, Andy, Zaid, 2 completely different versions of events of what's going on. And while all of this has been happening, Jay is outside, completely oblivious to what's going on. So let's get back to his statement. He's asked.
So you went outside?
Uh-huh.
Did you come back in again?
Yes, after like 5 minutes.
Did he ask you to come in, or did you come in on your own?
No, I knocked on the door.
Who opened the door for you?
Zaid.
Zaid, did he tell you to come in?
He smiles and says, "Hello." And I was like, lost in his smile or something. Then he pushes me up.
I swear to you, all of this is exactly what he's saying. I was like lost in his smile or something. Then he pushes me up.
He pushes you in?
Yes, he pushes me in.
When you were pushed in, what happened?
I saw a gun.
Who had a gun?
Tariq.
Did you notice anything different in the room?
Now you may answer, yes, everyone was tied up and on the floor and there was multiple people with weapons. It looked like a robbery to me. But no, Jay responds,
It was dark.
It got dark?
Uh-huh.
Was it dark so you couldn't see anything?
No, it was like dark and bluish.
So you couldn't read a newspaper, but you could see?
You could see people around.
Okay, where's Joong?
Joong was already on the floor.
What about Andy?
On the floor.
What about Mooney?
Mike was on the floor too.
Was Zaid on the floor?
No.
Zaid let you in?
Zaid let me in.
And Tariq was in the room with a gun?
Tariq was in the room with a gun.
very weird echo going on in the interrogation room. So let's go back to Andy's statement.
Okay, and you get on the floor?
Yeah, we all get on the floor. While Jay's outside.
Okay, did they turn off the lights?
Yes, they turned off the lights immediately.
Okay, and while you're on the floor, what did they call Jay inside?
Now this is interesting because let's not forget, Jay has just said after 5 minutes, he goes and knocks on the door and Zaid lets him in. He gets lost in his smile. Then he's pushed through the door.
Okay, and while you're on the floor, what did they call Jay inside?
Yes, Tariq was on the door, back door, and he called Jay inside.
But the lights are out, right?
Lights are out.
And he calls Jay inside?
Jay inside.
There's that bloody echo again.
And when Jay comes to the door, what happens?
Immediately, he's like, and gets down on the floor. He asked him to get down on the floor immediately.
Did Tariq make any statement?
Yeah. He was like, he just changed. He completely changed. He was not the Tariq I knew from, the past. He said, "Do you want to see John Gotti? Do you see the John Gotti? I am John Gotti. You'll see him, bastard." He made statements like that.
So while I'm beating them up, I'm screaming, I'm telling him, "You guys wanted to meet John Gotti? I'm John Gotti." So it's just
My God.
so ludicrous. No, it's in the freaking the statement. You think I'm lying to you? It's in the statement. And I'm like, you really are serious? You police officer, like really, like you took this shit and you said, "Yeah, you telling the truth, kid." I write books now. I mean, that could be the ending of a great book.
Oh, man, this story is just like, it's bonkers. And I've heard some stories, man.
Listen to me. It's bonkers. It is freaking bananas, how you call it. It's just, I don't know. I sit there sometime. People say after 20 years, you kind of understand it. I'm still stunned. I still sit there. People who've met me here and have known me for 20 years, of course they're not there, but they just say, just knowing a person is like, this makes no sense.
These are statements that three men are making to what I can only imagine are seasoned detectives in a murder case where a man could be sentenced to death. And I'm not even bringing you everything. There is obvious leading. There is obviously huge discrepancies in what's going on. What frustrates me and what I don't understand is how detectives can look at these three statements and still be quite happy to go after someone for murder. I try and remain as impartial as I can, but this is just insanity. So, as I've already said time and again in this episode, there are so many issues within these statements. There are so many bizarre and stupid things that are said. They talk about how they're all tied up. They have duct tape. He said you put 5 to 6 rounds of duct tape around, fully around the head, the whole, like around the mouth, around his head. But then apparently he was pleading for his life at one point. How's he doing that with duct tape around his mouth?
I'm glad you caught that. I don't want to say it to you. It's stupid.
Jay talks about how he and Andy are moved to the front of the store while the others stay out the back. The detective asks him how this happens because they have their legs and their hands tied. He says that they're carried there. And he says they're there for a while, until suddenly Tariq and the others get spooked by something. They poke their heads out from the back room and tell Jay and Andy to quickly move to the back of the store. He is again reminded by the detective that they have their legs tied. And he just says, oh, yeah, no, so they carried us back again. One of the police officers corrects Jay at one point because he talks about putting his fingerprints on the gun. And the cop's like, didn't you have your hands tied? How are you doing this? And he's like, did you not have your hands tied at this point? And he goes, I don't think so, no.
I mean, it's lunacy.
Andy would say that he was beaten horrifically, savagely beaten. In fact, claims the beating of him, Jay, Joong, and nephew Mooney goes on for 15 to 20 minutes. Andy really lays it on thick that he was properly bashed, like big time, even choked at one point.
Yeah.
Was there ever any injuries found on these guys? Like any medical reports done?
No, nothing. There's one picture of Andy I've seen in the record. This is the day he came into the police. He's perfectly fine. There's nothing. I mean, the proper procedure when somebody gets assaulted, you call a medic, you go EMT, you call, you get records, okay, take pictures of their bruises and stuff, things that I did to them. I mean, they were showing I can't even tell you that they had the poor people, like, they were burned and stuff, and they were showing their pictures all over the freaking trial for like almost an hour. And I'm like, okay, these two are saying I did this, and they say I beat them up, and they have all these bruises. Where?
You have 1 minute remaining.
I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. Imagine being a juror in this case. I've been told that a number of them fell asleep during it. We'll hear all about that in another episode. Coming up, we'll continue to look at the discrepancies with these statements, especially when it comes to the actual murder of Joong. You can see the police are coaching him and wanting more because he just says, oh, and then Tariq said he's sleeping. And then the copper says, did he say, this motherfucker's sleeping? He goes, oh, yeah. He said, this motherfucker's sleeping, and everyone started laughing. And I use modern technology to take a look at these statements. And what it had to say was incredibly interesting. That's what the AI said after reading his statement. Next time on 1 Minute Remaining. 1 Minute Remaining is a Mashed Pumpkin production, created, hosted and produced by Jack Lawrence, with thanks to special guest producer Alyssa Cook, voice of the detective played by Brian P.C., audio and sound design by Jack Lawrence and Dom Evans of Earsay.